Hi, Murtaza. How are you doing?
I'm good. Hi, Justin. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for taking the time to join the podcast today.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me. It's a great opportunity to be on your podcast. I've heard a couple of your episodes. I think the last one I heard was Adam, a 11-year-old from UAE. It was really great to see you guys talking about, advanced technology. So yeah, thank you for
Yeah.
inviting me on this podcast.
Oh, well, my pleasure. And Adam's a great guest. Yeah, we had a really fascinating conversation. I would like to know what you're currently working on, and I was hoping you could also tell listeners, who you are and yeah, what you're doing in your role right now.
So I'm based in the UAE. I've been working in the education sector for almost 7 years. I'm currently working with the Apple Education Partner as an Apple Education consultant. My previous job, I worked as a head of training and innovation for ATLAB, which is a Lego education partner, along with a lot of other product lines where we worked in. My main focus is in hands-on education, STEM, STEAM, or makerspace as we call it. And also I delved a little bit into artificial intelligence in K-12 education.
Wow. Wow, you really covered a lot of areas. I want to talk about so much in there, but I was most curious about, you've worked for education companies. You work for companies that are involved in education. Do you have an opinion or any thoughts on what role, at a high level, does a company have to play in education? Like, do they have a responsibility to teach kids just as much as schools do? Do they have a mission, or should they have a mission to be teaching kids as much as a teacher or another educator?
Yeah, I feel definitely companies, corporates, especially edtech companies, have a huge part in education with schools. So of course, at the heart and the crux of education are schools, our teachers, and our students. But educational companies provide that latest cutting edge technologies, provide the teachers the tools and the professional development needed for schools and education organizations to grow. So yeah, I've been fortunate enough to work with multiple partners in that region. In fact, today morning I was reading a book on unlocking creativity and transforming education and school curriculum by Ray Williams. And one of the key features it mentioned was working with these partners to bring in creativity and the latest tools which helps the education just from a substitution point of view to a real redefinition point.
Wow, wow. And was that what was the biggest takeaway from that book, do you think?
For me, the biggest takeaway, I mean, I'm still halfway on the book, but my biggest takeaway was that, professional development for teachers is a undermined thing. And I understand why. I've been in the training field. Trainings are looked as marathons now. Companies, and I I'm solely responsible also for it, where we go and do a marathon training session for 4 or 5 hours, and sometimes it's multiple days, where the teachers are not able to know. It's not about taking in the information, but it's about digesting the information and applying it in the classroom, and a lot of that is lost. So it talked about a lot of coaching methods, especially dividing the whole journey for the teacher in terms of professional development. So yeah, that was my biggest takeaway in from the book.
Fascinating, fascinating. Yeah, I really agree with you there. And that book sounds like something I'd be interested in as well. Uh, you probably would agree with the statement that, standardized tests just maybe aren't working as well as they did in the past, right? Like, that book and from, your other conversations on podcasts as well, I gather that, you are a fan of lifelong learning, of, training, for the long term, not just cramming information in and for a test. If not for standardized testing, or if not for a short test, how do we measure progress, or how do we gauge how well a student is doing, instead? What other ways could we track their progress?
Standardized tests never worked in the past. I mean, it's a myth. I'm not a big fan of standardized tests unless we want to just standardize creativity in one level. So for me, no, I'll refer to this quote from Gene Piaget, who was one of the key members of hands-on learning and his theory of constructivism. And I can't really remember his quote, but he mentioned that education systems should learn a lot from video games, because the way they are, video game designers design video games, they keep the kids engaged, and at the same time they measure progress. So yeah, in a very simple terms, if we can have measuring progress in bite sizes as kids progress through the year. It could be gamified. Yeah, big fan of gamification, but at at the student space, that would be my key take on how we could measure progress. At the same time, collecting artifacts. So I also believe a lot in project based learning. So rather than teaching for one particular skill, we could teach for mastery. So it does not need, when we talk about standardized test, we talk about a time duration that, okay, we would decide on May 20th that we're going to have a test and everyone should be ready by that day. But life does not work that way. Life gives, if you're ill and if your doctor tells you that, okay, I'm going to give you this medicine and you have to get well on this day. Do you think your body is going to work that way? No, that's not
No,
the case. So everybody reacts in its different ways to medicine. Some get well sooner, some get well a little later, but that's normal, right? Similarly, kids should be given, you give the information and let them digest that information and progress on their own time. But yeah, the job of the doctor is to heal the patient. Similarly, the job of the teacher is to make sure that the student reach that level of mastery. I
that's a
hope I
fascinating
tried to
example.
make.
I love that. Yeah. Education is not formal. It's not standardized at all. Everyone is learning at a different pace. We talked about Adam just at the very beginning of this recording, and yeah, like he is obviously miles ahead of a lot of other people, but that doesn't mean he should be held back. It's all personal. Uh, what has like you've had a really diverse career journey, and it sounds like you've picked up so many little bits of knowledge just throughout your time in the education space. What has been the one big takeaway that you've gotten since maybe your start as in the workforce up until now? Has there been any one thing that you've learned that just maybe blew your mind, or maybe something that you take with you into future jobs now?
So for me, the biggest takeaway in education is, when I heard about the flow theory, by Check that it's a balance, and it's a very delicate balance between skills and the level of, what do you call, the test or whatever challenges you push forward. So in life, that's the way it is. So I started my journey in education 8 years before. I'm a mechanical engineer by profession, inspired by my father, who is also a mechanical engineer. Now, one of the things about which I love about mechanical engineers is it involves a lot of hands-on. Okay, and that brought me to this field of hands-on learning and education. Again, I started my career into with higher colleges or universities, where I would go and install turnkey projects, especially computerized numerical control machines, which are CNC machines, which help in manufacturing. So a lot of that was there. And when working with these machines, these computer numerical control machines, you plug in the design and they will manufacture the whole process, which till today in many places is done manually using a lathe or a milling machine. Now, although it's computerized, but the information and the learning still remains intact, while the objective is differ. So rather than you working on the machine and you're using a skill there, you would now transform the skill to on a computer and you would do the CAD drawing and CAD designing. Again, coming back to the flow part of it, as I progressed my career, I saw that no, it's just not with the students, it's not with the teachers, but in life, if life throws you no in the deep ocean without you having the correct skills, you will be in trouble. So skills are progressive in nature, it's a continual improvement which is there, and that's what learning should always be about.
Fascinating. Yeah, I very much agree with you. Similarly, do you believe that, maybe you could lose a skill? I know that, for example, I've been able to do something like I used to know how to, solve a Rubik's Cube, and I haven't solved one in years, and now I forget. Do you think that like that there's, the ability to forget skills, and do you always have to continue to work on them in order to maintain them?
Yes, I'll get you one Rubrik's Cube soon after the podcast.
You're ready
But
for me.
I I feel losing a skill is actually a good thing. And now there are been I've research about learning, relearning, and unlearning. So yes, losing a skill is okay, and you, sometimes it's not that you completely lose a skill. So I'm pretty sure that you pick up a Rubik's Cube, you go through the algorithms again, and you may not take the same amount of time you took previously to learn the skill. So yes, it's not about the actual skill, but it's about the life skills which are behind it. So I have not worked on a computerized numerical machine from last, I think, 4 years or 5 years. So if you're going to give me one today, I may not be able to operate it. But if you're going to tell me that, okay, you have a couple of days to relearn it and work on it, I will be able to. You know why? Because I have the confidence that I've done it in the past. So it's not about learning the skill. It's not about losing the skill. It's about having the confidence that you have in your own self, about your own creativity, about your own ability to do the skills.
That's such an interesting perspective on it. I never really thought about it like that. But yeah, it's I can understand how, yeah, it can be a good thing to lose a skill and then relearn it, then you just making it more concrete in your head. Um, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. You were on a podcast about well-being with some other educators, and this was a podcast about well-being for educators. Uh, I was curious, how can students and teachers work together to make sure that they don't push themselves to unhealthy levels of stress without, burning themselves out? Like, how can we enforce the idea of hard work without um, maybe promoting unhealthy levels of hard work, if that makes sense?
Yes. Before I talk about well-being, it's a highly talked about topic in today's time about in education. A lot of people are talking about it, and unfortunately, and this is my opinion, I may be wrong. It's some no, it's something like a few years back we were talking about 21st century skills. So there was a lot of talk about 21st century skills, but really very less which was going inside working on 21st century skills. And I feel the same thing today. Now post pandemic, there's a lot of talk about well-being, but there's actually very less work which is truly be done on well-being. Now, for me, well-being, especially if you talk about educators, I I did teach in a school for a year, and I will be honest, I was not able to teach. It's a very tough job, and kudos to all the teachers who are teaching, online, offline, hybrid, and they are giving the best. And the amount of burnout which I see in being a teacher trainer, I get the opportunity to talk to a lot of teachers, and the amount of burnout which is there, just imagining with the number of technology softwares which have come into play in the last 6 8 months, it's really overwhelming. No s- I'm sure a lot of teachers have the imposter syndrome, or they have lost their ability. They feel that no, they're not good at their jobs. But trust me, they are the teachers are doing their best in given the current scenario. Now the question about well-being is, you can only be, as you have heard in, on planes, that you can only put the oxygen mask for your neighbor, even it could be your kid, bef- by first putting your own oxygen mask.
Right.
So I think that that really works in the same way in well-being, that you need to take care of your own self. um, as an educator, look at your own well-being before you look at others' well-being. And the moment you start looking at your own well-being, you you can look at the well-being of the students and of the parents, which is there. So yeah, that's my take on well-being in a very simple way.
Yeah, that's awesome. I completely agree. It's so hard to have, empathy for others without, taking care of yourself first. And that's something that I'm really hoping that teachers are able to do in these times right now. It's so hard for them. Um, you talked about how to empower students. You talked about at the very beginning of the pandemic, you had, I think, an app challenge. You had them create an app for well-being. Um, I thought this was a really cool idea to have a contest for this. Do you have any ideas or any other suggestions for educators on how they can empower students in a similar way? How could a student who's maybe learning remotely, how can they feel empowered to keep going, keep learning? Do you have any suggestions that are similar to like a contest for that?
So for me, one of no, I'm a big fan of the Sustainable Development Goals. In fact, just last month I started a website which is called E Can Make, which stands for Everyone Can Make, and it has free lesson plans for teachers on sustainable development goals. So yes, I do feel sustainable development goals is just as the well-being competition when we held in the start of the pandemic is a great way for teachers to involve, firstly, project-based learning, second, to make learning more relatable and lifelong. So when kids learn about poverty, they learn about quality education, they learn about peace for earth. These are the topics which echo to them. And the good part about these topics is, it's not about, no, quality education or poverty is there in the textbooks. It's always been there. But what's great about sustainable development goals is they're concrete. There are 17 in numbers, and each of them have then a measurable target, and they are each and a lot of countries are working towards it, so they can see the progress which is there, and they can actually contribute towards it. And a couple of examples, like the world's largest lesson, if you go to UNESCO's website, or if you just go to sustainable development goals lesson plans, you would see a lot of resources there. So yeah, that's something which I really encourage teachers to take that. In fact, my contention is that each and every lesson, be it in any subject, should have a sustainable development goals attached to it, just like how we have our education standards mentioned on lesson plan.
I love that idea. I love that idea. That's really, really fascinating. Um, what do you think educators, teachers can do differently once we return to the classroom? I guess you kind of already touched on this a little bit, but is there anything else that you would recommend that they do differently, change about their teaching style once COVID is behind us? And do you think things will be the same once we get students back into their seats? Do you think that the idea of learning, do you think the idea of teaching is going to be the same as traditionally?
It would be very unfortunate if we move back to the traditional learning. Now, COVID has, when it slowed down the world economy, and it really put the whole world into standstill, it has actually raised education to a next level. It has increased the technology adoption to a next level. And the only advice I would give teachers is to keep the change and keep embracing technology inside education. Now, uh, I know a lot of teachers would be inclined to go back to their traditional methods, but this has really helped education take the next leap. And there is nothing we could do about technology except accept it. So yeah, that would be my advice to teachers, that keep using the technology, and don't use technology just because your management says it. Don't use technology if it's making your life hard. Use technology if it's benefiting you, if it's benefiting your students, and it's benefiting your teaching.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea. I totally agree with you that, we have to move forward. I mean, I personally have benefited from using more technology at work and school. I know not everyone does, but it's certainly something that I think we have to all grapple with in some way or another. Uh, Besides changing, the way that we use technology in the classroom, people have talked about how the K to 12 education system, you move from grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's kind of outdated. I think that's like over 100 years old by this point. Uh, would there be any changes that you would also make to that system? How would you design your ideal education system if not K through 12?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So for me, it no, yeah, there could be a lot of ideas which could be thrown out on how new education system could work, but really implementing them and making it feasible, it's and working, that would be involving a lot of work with governments and so on. So I would still keep the K to 12 education system intact. The only thing which I would do is really, rather than teaching in silos, I would teach based on project based learning, where you have a couple of subjects together and you build on it. So one of the things which I had implemented while I was teaching was, uh, every month, assemble the whole teaching team and pick up a topic, pick up a theme, and then every brainstorm on a couple of days on how you could work with the theme. Like one of the themes were, we took up the theme of trees, and coconut trees in specific, and then it was taken up in geography on how it could be done. It was taken up in science on the different aspects of how coconut tree would be benefit, and each and every part of it was benefit. So yeah, that's just giving an example of, pick up a theme and then just apply it across all subjects, and then you would always see, while teachers are talking, okay, yeah, great, uh, maths and science teachers could work together, or maths or English teachers could work together on a topic. So I think that would be the only change I would do, rather than completely changing the whole K to 12 education system.
That's great. Yeah, yeah. It would be a big job to change it anyway. So let's try to tweak it in a better way, more efficient way. Um, I want to be respectful of your time. I know that you're very busy, but I want to ask you, what does the future of STEAM look like to you? Is there any changes or anything like any advancements, any emerging technology that you're predicting to come out in the next 10 years or so? And what are you excited about next?
Okay, so this is a research which is always popping up in many places, that we do not know. 65% of the jobs have never been invented. So we do not know where the kids will be when they graduate. So I for sure cannot predict what the future technologies could be. My intuitions are that artificial intelligence in education will be more and more prominent. I There is a company which is called Century Tech, which is I'm really excited about. They have changed the way assessments work. Uh, Cognition virtual robotics toolkit is also one of them, where transforming CAD designing, or bringing that design skills and robotics on a virtual level. That's really great, and I'm seeing a lot of progress in that field. And augmented reality is also something which is really exciting in terms of bringing hands-on technology in a different way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm excited for all of that as well. Are there any links that you'd like to share to listeners, any social medias of yours or any websites? I know you've already mentioned one of them. Anything that you'd like to get out there?
No, I've this is the website you can make, which I regularly write blogs on, and guys can follow me on at Maker Murtaza on all the social media, on Twitter or Instagram. which is there. Currently, I'm also working with two distinguished authors from the US, Matt Rhodes and Becky Collin, on writing a book which is called Amplify Learning. And I would be writing the chapter on Makerspace now, which is expected to come out in 2022. So excited for that.
2022. Okay, it's coming up soon. Well, I'll include all of that in the notes of the podcast, and thank you for sharing. And I just want to thank you once more for taking the time to join the podcast today. I really appreciated this conversation.
Thank you, Justin, for inviting me, and all the best for your team at Cognation. And really love the work you guys do there.
Thank you. Thank you.